Good evening, everybody. I'm Joshua Habersky, the Deputy Executive Director and Head of Government Affairs for the Premium Cigar Association. Joined by my colleague, Glenn Loop, who leads up all of our state advocacy. Glenn and I have been working together for the past 3 years in developing a lot of our government affairs programs, and one of which, what we started last year, were these regional trainings. This is the last of four that we're conducting, and for the West Coast region. The way that the format will work tonight, I'll talk a little bit about some of the federal issues, which is predominantly what I'm focused on, White House, FDA, and Congress. And then Glenn will talk about the region and what's going on in the states, what has been achieved this year, and some things to be on the lookout for next year. I will stop the recording and allow questions after we kind of give our updates. With the federal piece, we have a lot of different things going on. Even as of today, we were preparing for a meeting with the White House Office of Management and Budget regarding the characterizing flavor prohibition. So this is something that we objected to in the proposed rule stage. The Food and Drug Administration has sent this over to the White House for its final review. And that's the stage of where things sit now. We will be releasing a grassroots action alert for retailers and consumers tomorrow to write to the White House in opposition of this rule. And we will be voicing our concerns with the overly broad language of the rule itself, retail impact, and a lot of the analysis that the FDA has failed to do. I think what's also troubling is the FDA, as of November or October 31st this week, formally decided to appeal the ruling, the Judge Maida's decision over the overall deeming rule as applied to premium cigars. So, that's something that we will be fighting. We are working alongside our partner organization, Cigar Rights of America, as well as the Cigar Association of America, and ensuring that, number one, premium cigars are not subject to those regulations. And that's why we continue to fight any proposed regulations that the FDA is coming up with. As you know, if for some reason the FDA were successful in their appeal of the decision, a lot of these rules would apply to premium cigars as well as other tobacco products. One of those that we recently objected to was the manufacturing practices standard. This would apply pharmaceutical and food-like rules on foreign and domestic tobacco manufacturing. This is everything from ventilation to standards and what clothing rollers would have to wear. This is a far-reaching regulation that's not meant for the uniqueness and the small cottage industry of premium cigar manufacturing. So we raised our objections there, and we'll continue to monitor that. If Judge Maida's decision remains intact at the appellate level, that's something that would likely not apply to manufacturers of solely premium cigars. But there are some factories that don't only produce premium cigars and produce other cigars or other products, some pipe tobacco, and there's some questions as to the applicability if they produce things that are multi-category. Congressionally, we're not expecting too much. Congress, I think you saw in the past few weeks with the House, a bit of a mess, deciding on a Speaker of the House. They finally have a Speaker of the House, but as it relates to what's going on in Congress related to premium cigars, there are some, still percolating exemption efforts, obviously a little bit less influential because of the court decisions and how a lot of this has shifted to the litigation front. Um, the one bill that keeps percolating in two different forms is the Tobacco Tax Equity Act. These would double the cigarette tax and apply all other tobacco products at that level. This would be, several 100% increase on premium cigars if it were to go through. We were certainly at a more alarming point last year when it was included in the Build Back Better in the president's budget. But with how the House being controlled by Republicans, we're not expecting this to be included in any moving legislation. Nonetheless, we are still monitoring that. We as a team are also working on a lot of small business and retailer specific legislation. So we endorsed and are supporting fighting retail theft and retail crime, and credit card processing. So our playbook has expanded to new issue areas that affect the overall business of specialty tobacco retailing. Um, I'm going to turn it over to Glenn on the state front. The one thing that I would say is that Glenn has done a phenomenal job working with retailers this year. It was another year where we had no tax increases passed legislatively at the state level or the federal level. That's a record that Glenn and I are very proud of. And we had a lot of positive actions, nine states signing laws, and a lot of it is a testament to Glenn's work, the strengthening of state associations, and the work of retailers. And to the effect of the latter two, state associations and retailers, the PCA, in 2024, will be setting up a micro grant program for state associations where if there's a major issue that comes up, or somebody in a state wants to pursue a tax cap, they have an established state association. We will fund or partially fund at a match grant for lobbying. So we know that a lot of these will be $10,000 that will be matched by a state association. That is a new program for 2024 that we're piloting and we're very excited about. Know that if you are involved in your state association, we also provide a lot of logistics like our handbook, as well as, if you need to do mailings, websites, things like that, the PCA can assist. I think our greatest resource is our staff's ability to help, and it all begins with Glenn on the state front. So without further ado, the elder statesman, Mr. Glenn Loop.
He's very fond of that term, elder statesman. Starting to really get me psychologically. So thank you all. I got to take a nap. With that, really what happened this year was a true political anomaly because having watched cigar politics for the last 17 years, it was sort of the perfect storm. And it was really a testament to the leadership in those states where successful legislation was passed by their legislature and then signed by their respective governors. And we'll talk about a few of those tonight. I'm going to break this down. We won't take up too much of your time, but we're going to break it down into three parts. One, the types of issues that we confront at the state level. Secondly, the political landscape as we see it today in the Western states and what we think we'll be confronting. And then lastly, strategies and sources of assistance. The types of issues that we confront at the state level are flavor bans, tax bills, local authority legislation, where legislatures are granting local regulatory authority to local governments, and work to not get swept up in vape and e-cigarette legislation, which is the new trend by the public health community to sweep up everything into one big basket, because that vape and e-cigarettes are the real target. They're couching and positioning this stuff to be more of a sweeping nicotine regulatory approach or legislative approach at the state level. Um, and those are generally the issues that we confront on the negative side. On the positive side, we want to chat about cigar bar legislation, which has been successful this past year in North Dakota and Connecticut, and there's going to be a few more of those brewing nationally this year. Right now, and it's not too early to be thinking about what we're going to be confronting at the state level. Most of the country's legislatures will go into session in January. Pre-filing has already begun in many states, and then some, like California, never go away. So this is sort of the breakdown of the landscape as we see it today. And then when we go offline, we can chat about any others that may come up or that you may have heard of through your respective political channels in your states. I believe we're going to be revisiting a tax cap bill in the state of Wyoming. We've got some political appetite for that. We'll be working with our brethren at the Cigar Association of America on that legislation. The bill was 50-50, a split decision this past year. It was married to a bill that changed the time of collection for the OTP tax from the time of delivery to the time of sale. And that part of the bill successfully got through. The tax cap got muddled up in some other sidebar issues. So I believe we're going to be revisiting a tax cap bill in the state of Wyoming. Colorado has an impending referendum. I had a discussion in the last 7 days about this, and I'm going to have another one tomorrow. It's very perplexing. With Colorado taking on a very California style of governing where tax issues have to go to a referendum, what happened is it's almost like budgeting now by referendum. And the state collects more than projected. They've got to refund that back to the retailers. And really, it innately becomes an argument for a tax decrease. And that's a discussion that we need to be having with both the governor's office and the legislature in Colorado. So that's issues on the table. And given this fluctuation in the taxes that have been collected, where they're bringing in more than they stated that they were going to in the referendum, it's going to be somewhat of a moving target, and needs to be a discussion that the industry has with state leadership after this referendum next Tuesday. In New Mexico, it's going to be a question. I hope that doesn't come back up, but it's going to be a matter of protecting the tax cap. In the 11th hour of this year's 23 legislative session, the tax cap in New Mexico came under assault. And if it weren't for a line item veto by the governor, it would have gone away. I'm not sure that. But because it was on the radar screen in 23, we're going to keep it on the radar screen to make sure nothing surprises us in 2024. There seems to be some political momentum and groundwork laid for a tax cap piece of legislation in the state of Utah. In the state of Washington, the flavor ban won't go away, and that's a subject that is blossomed all over the country. States are not waiting for the federal action on flavored tobacco, and I think that'll be back on the table in the state of Washington. Likewise, in the state of Oregon, flavor bans have to be watched. Local authority legislation has to be watched, and also protecting the tax cap, which seems to be a proverbial subject that doesn't go away in Oregon as well. And in California, the sponsor of the bill for the generational smoking ban has promised to bring it back in 2024. So, since that's such a horrible national precedent, we will go full throttle in publicly opposing the generational smoking ban. And for those of you who haven't heard of the term, it's if you were born after X date, usually January of 2007, you would not be able to legally buy tobacco products for the rest of your life, no matter what age you become. If you make it to 21, if you make it to 50, if you make it to 80, I'm sorry, we can't sell you a tobacco product. This is the New Zealand model. It proves how bad legislation spreads. It's spreading in different parts of the world as we speak, including Great Britain. And it was only a matter of time that certain jurisdictions and states in the United States pick up on it, and California did. So we'll have to keep an eye on that just to send a signal. In the terms of the states where it's going to be quiet now because of really what happened in 2023, Montana, Idaho, and Nevada, each respectively in the West, got new tax cap legislation. It's one of those proverbial matters. I feel safe and secure about where those caps are, but once you got it, New Mexico proves you got to keep it. And then all should be quiet on the western front in Arizona. So that's sort of the breakdown of the states as we see them for the 11 states that are subject to this call. I want to chat a little bit about strategy now. One, we have posted our state association handbook on cigaraction.org, and cigaraction.org is where you can get all real-time updates on your state legislation. It's also the means that we inform you, the retailers, of the bills that are going on and hearings and opportunities for input at the state level. So we hope that all of our retail partners will put a link to cigaraction.org on your respective websites and encourage your customers to sign up for it. All they have to do is put in their name and zip code. We take care of the rest. That's the way we're going to build up our grassroots army of cigar voters to reinforce our messages when these bills come up in the state capitals. We want to encourage you to have Hill Days, and this was a successful strategy in Montana and Idaho and Nevada this year on their tax cap bills. Having a Hill Day where all of your retail partners descend upon your state capital, introduce yourselves, or go visit your respective state legislators, remind them of the issues that are important to you, put a face to a name, get to know your legislators on a first name basis, know their kids' names, their birthdays, where they live. Let them know that you're a bona fide small business constituent, and that will help us on the political front when confronting these bills. Encourage your customers to join you in sponsoring cigar town halls where you invite your state legislators into your shop. Let them see the demographic. Let them see the product. Let them see we're not marketing to children. Let them see that we're not, diving into the alternative nicotine business, if you will. It helps to get rid of those misnomers that our opposition uses to hurt us politically. And cigaraction.org also is our petition system to the legislators. That's the reason you need to get your consumers to sign up for it. It helps us with that network, and it allows us to have a greater foothold on outreach during the legislative session. All of this stuff will happen in real time. Notices on committee hearings, we're available to help you write testimony. We're available to help you do calls, conference calls on getting your message across to state legislators. And in those states that we've outlined where we think there's going to be legislation, we want to put those on your radar screen now so that we're fully ready to launch for the good, bad, and indifferent come time in January. So with that, Josh, I'll be glad to shut up and take any questions anybody may have.
Just before we go to the questions, one other point on the generational smoking bans that, as Glenn mentioned, we're starting to see those pop up. I think that's one of the craziest policy things. We came out actively against it when California introduced it this last go around, but it's also been percolating in Hawaii and Massachusetts. You mentioned the United Kingdom and Great Britain. That we will be filing a comment with that. They are actually seeking input on that proposal. So what has, once been kind of a far-flung, crazy pie in the sky policy proposal, we've said for the longest time, a lot of these nonprofit health groups are complete prohibitionists. And, at the end of the day, that's proven to be accurate. So the goalposts are certainly, moving on their end. They haven't been successful at, a lot of the restrictions that they've tried to put on place in parts of the country. But they are very strategic, and they are trying to basically go for the weak points. So one of the things that, Glenn mentioned, the local authority bills, that's the scariest piece, because they might not be able to get it in, the federal level or the state level, but it drains the resources of our association, and as well as some of our partner organizations, if you have to fight it at the city and county level. And our team is 3 people strong, so it's a lot of ground to cover. Before we go into the questions and answers, I know Bob Roberts is on. Bob is a member of our board of directors, and has really been phenomenal in setting up our board, giving us the resources and the leadership to get to the stage where we're at and launch new programs like the grant program. So, Bob, I don't know if you have anything you want to add before we go into the Q&A.
Yeah, Josh, I was just going to add that, crazy as it seems, the anti's tactic is to get a foothold, bleed us dry. And once you have a foothold, there's a lot of other crazies locally that'll pick up these, for example, Generation and other types of bands. So, we've got to take crazy seriously and defeat it quickly, because, as I said, one of their tactics is to bleed us.
Well, and as y'all well know, it only takes, it doesn't, all it takes is one legislator or one city councilman in Portland or Seattle and anybody in Washington and Oregon to latch onto this idea and say, well, let's introduce it here. I remember an idea that was floated in the ice, believe this is a true story, floated in the Icelandic parliament, that nicotine had to be prescribed by a doctor, and lo and behold, a legislator in Oregon introduced the same bill. So in this business, and in the world of tobacco control, bad ideas spread very quickly.